The sun had barely crested over the Palisade Mountains when Willa Ramsey's water bucket handle snapped clean through, sending 20 gallons of precious well water cascading across the dusty yard of her father's ranch like a small flood breaking free from captivity. Silver City, New Mexico Territory, in the summer of 1878, was not a forgiving place for wasted water. The drought had stretched into its third merciless week, turning the grasslands brittle and the cattle restless. Willa stood there in her worn calico dress, staring at the pooling water that was already beginning to disappear into the thirsty earth, feeling the weight of one more thing gone wrong press against her chest. She was 22 years old, and some days it felt like the ranch was trying to shake her family loose the way a dog shakes off fleas. Her father, Samuel Ramsey, had taken ill 2 months prior with a fever that left him weak as a newborn calf. The ranch hands had drifted away one by one, following promises of better wages at the copper mines or heading north to escape the heat. Now it was just Willa, her father, and her 14-year-old brother Thomas trying to keep 200 head of cattle alive on land that seemed determined to return to desert. She bent down to examine the bucket, her long auburn hair falling forward over her shoulder. The rope handle had frayed completely through on one side, the fibers split and scattered like the last threads of her patience. She had hauled water from this well every morning for the past month, and she should have noticed the wear, should have fixed it before it became another problem on a growing list of problems. "Need some help there?" The voice came from behind her, deep and calm, with the kind of steadiness that made her think of deep water in a drought. Willa straightened and turned, shading her eyes against the climbing sun. The man sitting astride a dusty gray mare was tall even in the saddle, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard work and a face weathered by sun and wind into something honest. He wore a tan work shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, dark trousers, and a hat that had seen better days. His eyes were a startling blue against his tan skin, and when he swung down from his horse with an easy grace, she noticed he moved like someone accustomed to long days in the saddle. "I can manage," Willa said automatically, because that was what she always said, even when it was not remotely true. He walked closer, leading his horse, and glanced down at the broken bucket with a practiced eye. "That rope was frayed. Looks like it gave out all at once." "I noticed," she said, hearing the edge in her own voice and immediately regretting it. This stranger had not earned her frustration, even if the morning certainly had. But he did not seem offended. Instead, he knelt down beside the bucket, running his fingers along the remaining rope with the careful attention of someone who understood that in this territory, the difference between working equipment and broken equipment could mean the difference between survival and catastrophe. "I have rope in my saddlebag," he said, glancing up at her. "Good strong hemp. I could replace it for you if you would like." Willa hesitated. She had been raised to be wary of strangers, especially men who appeared out of nowhere on remote ranches where young women and sick fathers made easy targets. But something about this man's manner put her at ease despite her caution. He had not looked at her the way some men did, like she was something to be assessed and acquired. He had looked at the bucket, at the problem that needed solving. "Who are you?" she asked. "Xander Walsh," he said, straightening to his full height, which put him a good 6 inches taller than her own 5 feet and 7 inches. "I have been working at the Double Creek Ranch about 15 miles north. Contract ended yesterday, and I am heading south to see about a job at one of the cattle operations near Las Cruces." He gestured toward the well. "Stop to see if I might water my horse, if you do not mind. Saw you had trouble with the bucket as I rode up." "Willa Ramsey," she said after a moment. "This is my father's ranch. You can water your horse." She paused, weighing pride against practicality, and practicality won because it usually did. "And if you are serious about fixing the bucket, I would appreciate the help." Something flickered in his blue eyes that might have been approval, or might have been relief that she had not sent him on his way. "I am serious." He walked back to his horse and began unbuckling one of his saddlebags. Willa watched him work, noting the efficiency of his movements, the way his hands moved with purpose and certainty. She found herself noticing other things too, like the way his hair curled slightly at the back of his neck where it needed a trim, and the way he spoke to his horse in a low murmur that the animal clearly trusted. Within minutes he had extracted a coil of rope, a knife, and a small leather pouch that turned out to contain various tools and bits of hardware. He brought everything over to the well and set to work on the bucket without any fanfare or expectation of praise. He simply did the work that needed doing. "How long have you been ranching?" he asked as he cut away the old frayed rope, his voice conversational. "All my life," Willa said. She walked to the well and began lowering the bucket that was still intact, the one she used for drinking water rather than livestock. "My father bought this land in 1865, right after the war ended. Built everything you see here from nothing." "That is good land," Xander said, glancing out across the property. "Hard to work in drought, but good grazing when the rain comes." "If the rain comes," Willa corrected. She hauled up the bucket and poured water into a tin cup, then walked it over to where his horse stood patiently. The mare drank gratefully, and Willa found herself stroking the animal's soft nose, feeling the simple pleasure of a creature that asked for so little and gave so much. "Rain always comes eventually," Xander said. He was threading new rope through the bucket handle with quick, sure movements. "Might not come when you need it, but it comes. That is a fine philosophy when you have a well that is not running low and cattle that are not losing weight by the day," Willa said. She heard the bitterness in her voice and wished she could take it back. This man was helping her, and here she was snapping at him like a cornered animal. But Xander just nodded, not looking up from his work. "I have been there," he said quietly. "Lost a whole season's calves to drought 3 years back, up in Colorado. Watched good animals die because the grass would not grow and the water would not come. So I know it is not much comfort when I say the rain will return. But it is still true." There was something in the way he said it, without drama or self-pity, that made Willa believe he truly did understand. She refilled the cup and brought water for herself this time, drinking deeply and tasting the minerals that had always flavored their well water, the slight copper tang that meant home. "Where are you from originally?" she asked, because she wanted to know, and because the morning had started so poorly that talking to the stranger felt like an unexpected gift. "Montana Territory," Xander said. He finished threading the rope and began tying it off with a complex knot that looked like it would hold through seasons of use. "My father had a small spread up near Helena. I worked it with him until he passed 2 years ago. My mother had died when I was young, and I had no siblings, so I sold the land and started moving south, working ranches along the way." "I am sorry about your parents," Willa said. "Thank you." He tested the rope, pulling hard to make sure the knot would hold. There. Rope was frayed, replaced it now. Should be good for a long time if you check it regular for wear. He held up the bucket, and Willa could see that his work was clean and solid, the kind of repair that would last because it had been done right the first time. She felt a rush of gratitude that surprised her with its intensity. "Thank you," she said. "Really. I know it is just a bucket, but this morning that bucket felt like the last straw in a whole pile of straws." Xander stood and walked the bucket over to her, placing it in her hands. His fingers brushed hers briefly, and she felt the calluses there, the rough texture of hands that worked hard every day. "It is never just a bucket," he said. "It is one more thing you have to handle alone, on top of everything else." The understanding in his words, the way he saw past the simple object to the weight she was carrying, made something crack open in Willa's chest. She blinked against the sudden heat behind her eyes and focused on the bucket, on the neat coils of new rope. "Would you like some breakfast?" The words came out before she had fully thought them through, but once they were spoken, she did not want to take them back. "It is not much, just biscuits and eggs and coffee, but you must be hungry if you have been riding since dawn." Xander glanced toward the house, then back at her, and she could see him weighing the offer against whatever schedule he had set for himself. "I do not want to impose," he said. "You fixed my bucket and asked nothing in return," Willa said. "The least I can do is feed you a meal. Besides, my father would have my hide if I let a man ride away hungry after helping us out. That decided him. Then I accept, and I thank you." They walked toward the house together, Willa carrying the repaired bucket and Xander leading his mare. The ranch house was adobe with a wooden porch that Samuel Ramsey had built by hand, and morning glories that Willa's mother had planted before she died were still climbing the posts, their purple blooms the only real color in the dusty yard. Inside, the house was dim and cool, a relief after the building heat outside. Willa's father was sitting at the kitchen table, hunched over a cup of weak tea. He looked up when they entered, his eyes sharpening with concern when he saw the stranger. "Pa, this is Xander Walsh," Willa said quickly. "He helped me fix the water bucket when the handle broke. I have invited him for breakfast." Samuel Ramsey studied Xander with the careful attention of a man who had lived long enough to know that not every stranger could be trusted. But whatever he saw in Xander's face must have satisfied him, because he nodded slowly and gestured to the table. "Sit then," Samuel said, his voice rough with illness. "Any man who helps my daughter is welcome at my table." Xander removed his hat and took a seat, and Willa set about making breakfast with quick efficiency. She stoked the fire in the cook stove, mixed batter for biscuits, and cracked eggs into a pan with practiced ease. As she worked, she was aware of Xander and her father talking in low voices, the kind of conversation men have about weather and livestock and the price of feed. When Thomas came in from the barn, dusty and tired despite the early hour, he stopped short at the sight of a stranger at their table. Willa made introductions while she plated the food, watching her brother's wariness gradually ease as Xander treated him like a fellow ranch hand rather than a child. They ate together, and the food tasted better than it had any right to, the way food always does when it is shared with others. Xander complimented the biscuits, and Willa found herself smiling despite everything, found herself noticing the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he was amused, the way he listened more than he spoke. After breakfast, Samuel excused himself to rest, and Thomas headed back out to check on the cattle. That left Willa and Xander alone in the kitchen, and she felt suddenly self-conscious, aware of her worn dress and the flour on her hands. "I should be moving on," Xander said, but he said it slowly, without conviction. "You should," Willa agreed, and she did not sound convinced either. They stood there for a moment and something passed between them, a recognition that felt too large for such a brief acquaintance. Willa had the strange sense that this man, this stranger who had appeared out of the morning dust, understood something essential about her, something she had not known needed understanding. "The thing is," Xander said carefully, "I do not have a job waiting for me in Las Cruces. I have the name of a ranch that might be hiring, but it is just a possibility. The thing is," Willa said, matching his tone, "we need help here. My father is too sick to work, Thomas is willing but young, and I am running myself into the ground trying to keep everything afloat. We cannot pay much, but we can offer room and board and a share of whatever we make when we sell cattle in the fall." Xander's blue eyes searched her face. "Are you offering me a job?" "I am offering you a job," Willa confirmed. Her heart was beating faster than it should, and she told herself it was because they desperately needed the help, not because of the way he was looking at her. "Then I accept," Xander said, "on one condition." "What is that?" "That you tell me honestly what needs doing and let me do it, without running yourself into the ground trying to do everything alone. Willa felt her throat tighten. I have been doing everything alone for a long time. I know, Xander said gently. But you do not have to anymore. That was how Xander Walsh came to stay at the Ramsey Ranch, and how Willa's life began to change in ways she could not have predicted when she woke that morning to a broken bucket and dusty ground. The first few days were an adjustment. Willa was not accustomed to having someone else shoulder the burden of the heavy work, and she kept trying to do things herself until Xander would appear at her elbow and quietly take over. He mended fences that had been sagging for months, cleaned out the barn that had been accumulating debris, and rode out each day to check on the cattle with a thoroughness that put her mind at ease. He was good with Thomas too, teaching the boy things about ranching that Samuel was too ill to pass on, showing him how to read the land and the animals, how to anticipate problems before they became crises. Willa would watch them working together and feel something warm unfurl in her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. In the evenings, after the work was done and supper was cleared away, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains. Samuel would join them when he had the strength, and they would talk about everything and nothing, the kind of easy conversation that builds connection stone by stone. Willa learned that Xander had fought in the war, though he did not like to talk about it. She learned that he had a talent for gentling horses, a way of speaking to them that made even the most skittish animal calm. She learned that he liked his coffee black, his eggs scrambled, and that he had a habit of humming old songs while he worked. And Xander learned things about her too. He learned that she had taught herself to read from her mother's old books, that she had a head for numbers that let her keep the ranch accounts in perfect order, that she loved this land with a fierceness that bordered on desperation. He learned that she sang when she thought no one was listening, sweet high melodies that floated out from the kitchen in the early mornings. He learned that she was stronger than she believed and more vulnerable than she showed. 3 weeks after Xander arrived, the drought finally broke. The rain came in the night, a thunderstorm that rolled down from the mountains with lightning that split the sky and thunder that shook the house. Willa woke to the sound of water on the roof, that precious drumming that meant life and growth and survival, and she went to the window to watch the rain pour down in sheets. She saw Xander standing in the yard, his face turned up to the sky, letting the rain soak him through. There was something almost reverent in his posture, a gratitude that needed no words. Without thinking, Willa threw on her dressing gown and ran outside to join him. The rain was cold and hard and perfect. It plastered her hair to her head and soaked through her nightclothes in seconds. But she did not care. She spread her arms wide and laughed, a sound of pure relief and joy, and when she opened her eyes Xander was looking at her with an expression that made her breath catch. "You are beautiful," he said, and the words were nearly lost in the sound of the storm, but she heard them anyway. "I am soaked through and probably look like a drowned cat," Willa said, but she was smiling. "Beautiful," Xander repeated, and he stepped closer, close enough that she could see the water streaming down his face, the way his shirt clung to his broad shoulders. "Xander," she said, and his name on her lips felt like a question and an answer all at once. He reached out slowly, giving her time to step away, but she did not step away. His hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing away rainwater, and then he was kissing her and she was kissing him back, and the rain fell around them like a blessing. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but it deepened quickly into something fierce and needful. Willa felt like she had been waiting for this moment without knowing she was waiting, like every hard day and lonely night had been leading her here, to this man, to this rain-soaked instant of connection. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Xander pressed his forehead to hers and said, "I did not come here looking for this." "Neither did I," Willa whispered, "but I am glad I found it anyway." "So am I." They stood there in the rain for a long time, holding each other, and when they finally went inside they were both shivering and grinning like fools. Willa built up the fire while Xander changed into dry clothes in the spare room where he slept. And when he came back to the kitchen, she had coffee brewing and blankets warming by the stove. They sat together wrapped in blankets, drinking hot coffee and watching the rain continue to fall, and Willa thought that she had never felt happier or more complete than she did in that moment. The rain lasted for 3 days, soaking deep into the earth, filling the water sources, and bringing the land back to life. The cattle fattened on new grass, Samuel's health began to improve with the cooler air, and Thomas seemed to grow 3 inches overnight, his boy's body starting to stretch into a young man's frame. And Willa and Xander fell deeper in love with each passing day. It was not a love built on grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was built on shared work and easy silences, on the way Xander always made sure Willa ate when she got too focused on tasks, on the way Willa mended his shirts without being asked. It was built on trust and respect and the simple pleasure of being near each other. Samuel noticed, of course. A father would have to be blind not to see the way his daughter's face lit up when Xander entered a room, the way Xander's eyes followed Willa wherever she went. One evening in late August, he called Xander onto the porch for a private conversation. "You have feelings for my daughter," Samuel said. It was not a question. Xander did not see any point in denying it. "Yes, sir, I do. And what do you intend to do about those feelings?" "With your permission, sir, I intend to marry her," Xander said. "If she will have me." Samuel studied him for a long moment. "You are a good man, Xander Walsh. I have watched you these past months, and I know character when I see it. You work hard, you treat my family with respect, and you make Willa happy. That is all a father can ask for his child." "Then I have your blessing?" "You have my blessing," Samuel said, "but you will have to ask Willa yourself. She is not a woman who lets anyone make decisions for her, and I raised her that way on purpose." Xander smiled. "I would not want her any other way." He proposed to Willa 3 days later, on a Sunday afternoon when the work was light and the air was sweet with late summer. He took her riding up into the foothills, to a place where the view opened up and you could see the ranch spread out below like a patchwork quilt of green and gold. They dismounted and sat on a flat rock, sharing water from a canteen and watching hawks circle overhead. Xander was nervous in a way he had not been nervous since he was a young man facing battle, and he had to clear his throat twice before the words would come. "Willa," he said, "I came to this ranch looking for nothing more than a place to water my horse, and I found everything I did not know I needed." She turned to look at him, her green eyes questioning. "I found a home," he continued. "I found purpose. I found family. And I found you." He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I love you, Willa Ramsey. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you face every challenge without flinching. I love the way you sing in the mornings and the way you look at this land like it is a part of your soul. I want to build a life with you if you will let me. Will you marry me?" Willa's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling the whole time. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, Xander Walsh. I love you too. So much it scares me sometimes. I love how you showed up exactly when I needed you most. I love how you see me, really see me, not just what I can do but who I am. I love the way you are gentle with the animals and patient with Thomas and respectful with my father. Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, deep and sweet, and the hawks continued their lazy circles overhead and the sun poured down like liquid gold and everything was exactly as it should be. They were married in October, when the heat had broken and the cottonwoods along the creek had turned bright yellow. The ceremony was small, held at the ranch with the local minister presiding. Samuel gave his daughter away with tears in his eyes. Thomas served as best man with a pride that made him stand taller, and a few neighboring ranchers came to witness the union and share in the celebration. Willa wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in a trunk, and carried wildflowers that Xander had picked for her that morning. Xander wore his best suit, brushed clean and pressed, and when he said his vows his voice was steady and sure. "I promise to love you and honor you all the days of my life," he said. "I promise to work beside you, to shoulder your burdens and share your joys. I promise to be faithful and true, through drought and plenty, through hardship and ease. You are my home, Willa, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know it." Willa's vows were just as heartfelt. "I promise to love you with everything I am," she said. "I promise to trust you with my heart and my dreams. I promise to stand with you against whatever comes, to be your partner in all things. You came into my life when it was broken and you helped me mend it, not just the bucket but everything. I love you, Xander, and I always will." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Xander kissed his bride with a tenderness that made the women in attendance sigh and the men grin. The celebration that followed was joyful and rowdy in equal measure, with food and music and dancing that lasted until the stars came out. That night, in the room that had been Willa's since childhood and was now theirs together, they came together as husband and wife with a passion tempered by tenderness. Xander treated Willa like she was precious and powerful all at once, and she gave herself to him without reservation, trusting him completely. "I love you," she whispered in the darkness, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you too," he murmured into her hair. "Always." The years that followed were good ones. Samuel's health stabilized, and though he never quite regained his former strength, he was able to help with light work and oversee the ranch with Xander as his second. Thomas grew into a fine young man, capable and confident, eventually taking over more and more responsibility as he matured. Willa and Xander expanded the ranch, buying adjoining land when it became available and slowly building up one of the most successful cattle operations in Grant County. They weathered droughts and hard winters, dealt with rustlers and predators and market fluctuations, but they faced it all together, and that made all the difference. In the spring of 1880, Willa discovered she was pregnant. She told Xander one evening when they were alone, nervous despite everything because bringing a child into this hard land was never a decision to take lightly. But Xander's face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen, and he swept her up into his arms and spun her around despite her laughing protests. "We are going to have a baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "A baby, Willa." "Yes," she said, cupping his face in her hands. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not begin to cover it," he said. "I am overjoyed. I am blessed beyond measure." Their son was born in January of 1881, during a cold snap that had everyone worried but ultimately passed without incident. He came into the world squalling and red-faced, perfect in every way. They named him Samuel Xander Walsh after both his grandfathers, though they called him Sam from the start. Holding his son for the first time, Xander felt emotions too large for words. This tiny person, this new life, was a miracle built from love and hope and the joining of two lives into one. He looked at Willa, exhausted and radiant in the bed, and felt his love for her expand in ways he had not known were possible. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "For what?" Willa asked. "For this. For him. For everything." She smiled, tired but happy. "We made him together." "We did," Xander agreed. "And we will raise him together, to be strong and kind and true." "Yes," Willa said. "We will." Samuel Ramsey Sr. lived long enough to hold his grandson, to see the ranch thriving under Xander and Willa's management, to know that his legacy was secure. He passed peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1882, with his family around him and the knowledge that he had done well by them. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple marker that read Samuel Ramsey, 1820-1882, beloved father and grandfather. He built this land with his hands and his heart. Willa mourned him deeply but without regret, because he had lived a full life and died knowing his family was cared for. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Young Sam grew into a bright, curious boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's steady disposition. In 1884, Willa gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Grace, who arrived a month early but healthy and loud. In 1887, another son, Henry, rounded out their family, and Willa declared that 4 children were quite enough. "Thank you very much." Xander agreed, though privately he thought he would have been happy with a dozen children if they were all as wonderful as the 4 they had. He was a devoted father, teaching his children everything he knew about the land and the animals, but also about kindness and honor and the importance of keeping your word. Thomas married in 1885, bringing home a sweet-natured young woman named Margaret who fit into the family as if she had always been there. They built a house on the far end of the property and started their own family, working the ranch in partnership with Xander and Willa. The ranch continued to prosper. They added sheep to their livestock, diversifying in a way that protected them from market fluctuations. They improved the breeding stock, invested in better equipment, and built a reputation for fair dealing that brought them consistent business. By the early 1890s, the Ramsey Walsh Ranch was one of the most respected operations in the territory. But more than the success, more than the financial security or the growing family or the respect of their community, what mattered most to Xander and Willa was the life they had built together. It was a life rooted in love and partnership, in the daily choice to stand together and work toward common goals. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Xander took Willa back to the spot where he had proposed, that overlook in the foothills where you could see the whole ranch spread out below. The children were with Thomas and Margaret for the day, giving them rare time alone together. They sat on the same flat rock, older now but no less in love, and looked out over everything they had built. "Do you ever think about that morning?" Xander asked. "When the bucket broke?" "All the time," Willa said. She leaned against him, fitting perfectly into the curve of his shoulder. "I think about how I was standing there feeling like everything was falling apart, and then you appeared like an answer to a prayer I had not known to pray. I think about how I almost rode past," Xander admitted. "I saw the ranch house and thought about watering my horse, but I was making good time and almost decided to push on to the next water source." Willa turned to look at him, eyes wide. "What made you stop?" "Honestly, I do not know. Something just pulled me toward the place, like I was meant to be there. Like you were waiting for me even though neither of us knew it." "I was waiting for you," Willa said softly. "My whole life, I was waiting for you. I just did not know it until you showed up and fixed my bucket and changed everything." Xander kissed her temple, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "Rope was frayed, replaced it now," he said, echoing those first practical words he had spoken to her. "If only I had known that replacing that rope would lead to all of this." "Would you have done anything differently?" Willa asked. "Not a single thing," Xander said firmly. "Every moment, every choice, every challenge has led us here. I would not change any of it." "Neither would I," Willa agreed. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the shadows lengthen across their land. For children, a thriving ranch, a community they were part of and contributed to, a love that had only deepened and strengthened with time. It was more than either of them had dared to dream of that dusty morning in 1878. "What do you think the future holds?" Willa asked eventually. Xander considered. "I think it holds whatever we make of it. More hard work, certainly. More challenges. But also more joy, more love, more moments like this one. As long as we face it together, I think the future looks bright." "Together?" Willa echoed, threading her fingers through his. "Always together." "Always," Xander agreed. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, the colors so vivid they almost seemed unreal. The land below was lush and green, the cattle fat and healthy, the buildings sturdy and well-maintained. It was a testament to years of labor and love, to partnership and perseverance. As they rode back down to the ranch house, side by side as they had been for 10 years and would be for many more to come, Willa thought about beginnings, about how the end of one thing, like a frayed rope breaking, could be the beginning of something else, something better and bigger and more beautiful than you ever imagined possible. She thought about the stranger who had appeared in her moment of need, offering help without expectation of reward. She thought about the choice she had made to trust him, to let him in, to accept his help and then his love. She thought about the life they had built from that simple moment of connection. "What are you thinking about?" Xander asked, noticing her smile. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest woman alive," Willa said. "I am thinking that sometimes the universe sends you exactly what you need, exactly when you need it, even if it comes in the form of a dusty cowboy with good rope and kind eyes." Xander laughed, the sound warm and rich. "And I am thinking that sometimes a man rides up to a ranch looking for nothing more than water for his horse, and rides away with everything he never knew his soul was searching for." "We are both lucky then," Willa said. "Incredibly lucky," Xander agreed. The children came running when they saw their parents approaching, Sam leading the way with the twins close behind and little Henry toddling as fast as his small legs could carry him. Xander and Willa dismounted and were immediately surrounded by small bodies and excited voices, everyone talking at once about what they had done that day. Xander swung Henry up onto his shoulders while Willa embraced the girls. Sam, at 8 years old, considered himself too grown up for such displays but still stayed close, grinning at his parents with obvious affection. Thomas and Margaret emerged from their house to collect their own children, and the two families stood together in the cooling evening air, talking and laughing, making plans for the next day's work and the next week's activities. This, Willa thought, was what it was all about. Not just the success or the security or even the love, though all of those things were precious. It was about family and community, about building something that would last beyond yourself, about leaving the world better than you found it. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Willa and Xander sat on their porch as they often did, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. "I love our life," Willa said simply. "So do I," Xander replied. He reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "I love you, Willa Walsh. More today than yesterday. More tomorrow than today." "I love you too," she said. "Thank you for stopping that morning. Thank you for fixing my bucket. Thank you for staying. Thank you for letting me," Xander said. "Thank you for taking a chance on a stranger. Thank you for choosing me." "I would choose you again," Willa said. "Every single time, I would choose you." "And I would choose you," Xander said. "In every lifetime, in every version of the story, I would choose you." They kissed then, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 10 years of love and the promise of all the years to come. When they finally pulled apart, they stayed close, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, the same stars that had shone down on them that first rainy night when they kissed in the storm. The same stars that would shine down on their children and their children's children, bearing witness to the ongoing story of love and family and perseverance. Inside the house, the clock struck 10. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and was answered by another. The night was cool and perfect, carrying the scent of sage and juniper and growing things. "Come to bed," Willa said eventually, standing and pulling Xander up with her. "Lead the way," he said, smiling. They went inside together, hand in hand, closing the door on the night and the world beyond. In the morning there would be work to do, children to raise, a ranch to run. There would be challenges and setbacks because that was the nature of life, especially life in a hard land. But they would face it all together, as they always had, as they always would. Partners in every sense of the word, bound by love and choice and the memory of a morning when a bucket broke and a cowboy stopped to help. The years continued to unfold in their own rhythm, each season bringing its particular demands and rewards. The children grew and changed, developing their own personalities and dreams. Sam showed an early aptitude for working with horses, able to gentle even the most fractious animals with patience and intuition. The twins, Emma and Grace, were different as night and day despite being identical in appearance. Emma loved the ranch and wanted nothing more than to follow in her parents' footsteps, while Grace was drawn to books and learning, dreaming of becoming a teacher. Young Henry, the baby of the family, was fearless and curious, always getting into scrapes and emerging with scraped knees and huge grins. Xander and Willa guided them all with firm hands and open hearts, teaching them the value of hard work, but also the importance of compassion and integrity. They wanted their children to be strong but not hard, to be capable but not callous, to be successful but not at the expense of their souls. The ranch continued to grow and evolve. In 1891, they added a new barn, a massive structure with room for additional livestock and equipment. In 1893, they invested in windmills for better water distribution, a decision that paid off handsomely when another drought struck the following year. They weathered the financial panic of 1893 better than many of their neighbors, thanks to their diversified operations and careful financial management. Through it all, Xander and Willa remained the steady center of an expanding circle. They were respected by their community, sought out for advice and assistance, known for their fairness and their willingness to help neighbors in need. They gave generously to the church, supported the local school, and opened their home to anyone who needed a meal or a place to stay. But their favorite times were still the quiet moments together, stolen between the demands of work and family. Early morning coffee on the porch before the day began in earnest. Evening rides to check on distant pastures, just the two of them and the setting sun. Late nights in their bedroom, talking about everything and nothing, making love with the comfortable passion of long familiarity mixed with constant discovery. "Do you ever miss it?" Willa asked one night, curled against Xander's side in the darkness. The freedom of being on your own, moving from place to place, answering to no one? Xander was quiet for a moment, considering. "No," he said finally. "I thought that was what I wanted after my father died. I thought freedom meant being untethered, unattached. But what I learned is that real freedom is finding a place where you belong and people who need you as much as you need them. This ranch, you, our children, this is the freest I have ever been because I am exactly where I am meant to be." Willa kissed his chest, right over his heart. "I am glad you figured that out." "So am I," Xander said. "Every single day, I am glad." In 1896, when Sam was 15, he asked his father if he could start training horses professionally, not just for the ranch but for sale to others. Xander recognized the passion in his son's request and agreed, helping him set up a small operation within the larger ranch framework. Within a year, Sam had developed a reputation for his skill, and people from all over the territory were bringing horses to him for training. The twins, at 12, were helping with different aspects of the ranch. Emma worked alongside her mother, learning the business side and the animal husbandry. Grace had convinced her parents to let her attend a boarding school in Santa Fe that specialized in preparing young women for teaching careers. It was hard to let her go, but Xander and Willa recognized that Grace needed to follow her own path, even if it led away from the ranch. Henry, at 9, was still trying to find his place, experimenting with different tasks and interests. He showed promise in metalwork and mechanics, fascinated by how things were built and how they functioned. Xander encouraged this interest, teaching him blacksmithing basics and letting him take apart and reassemble equipment under supervision. Thomas and Margaret's children, now numbering 5, added to the sense of ongoing life and growth. The ranch was becoming a compound, a multi-generational enterprise built on the foundation that Xander and Willa had established. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1898, the entire family gathered for a celebration. Grace came home from school, and Willa's aunt traveled from California, along with cousins and friends from all over the territory. The party lasted 2 days, with food and music and storytelling that went on until the early hours. On the second evening, as the party was winding down, Xander stood and called for everyone's attention. Willa looked at him with surprise, not knowing what he had planned. 20 years ago, Xander began, his voice carrying clearly in the evening air. I was a man alone, drifting south with no clear purpose beyond finding the next job. I stopped at this ranch to water my horse, and I found Willa standing in the yard with a broken bucket, looking like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. People chuckled, and Willa felt her cheeks warm with emotion and memory. I fixed her bucket, Xander continued, said the rope was frayed, replaced it now. Took me maybe 15 minutes, and I thought that would be the end of it. But Willa invited me for breakfast, and then she offered me a job, and then she offered me her heart. And my whole life changed in ways I could never have imagined. He turned to look directly at Willa, his blue eyes bright with love. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Willa Walsh. You are my partner, my best friend, the mother of my children, the keeper of my heart. Every day with you is a gift. Every challenge we face together makes us stronger. Every joy we share is doubled because you are there beside me. I love you more than words can say, and I thank God every day that my horse was thirsty and your bucket broke and we found each other exactly when we needed to. There were tears and applause, and Willa stood and went to her husband, embracing him while their children and extended family cheered. When she pulled back to look at him, her own eyes were wet. You are my everything, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. My rock, my home, my heart. I love you, Xander Walsh, and I always will. They kissed to more applause and cheering, and the party resumed with renewed energy, everyone raising glasses to toast the couple who had built such a remarkable life together. Later that night, alone in their room, Willa said, 20 years. It feels like both a lifetime and no time at all. I know exactly what you mean, Xander said. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, and she came to stand between his knees, running her fingers through his hair. There was gray in it now, silver threads mixed with the brown, but she thought it made him even more handsome. Do you think we will have another 20? She asked. I plan on it, Xander said, and 20 after that, if the good Lord sees fit. That would make us very old, Willa said, smiling. Then we will be very old together, Xander said. Growing old with you sounds like the best adventure I can imagine. Better than all the ones we have already had? Willa teased. Better than all of them combined, Xander said seriously. Because every day with you is an adventure, Willa. Every single day. She kissed him then, deeply and thoroughly, and they made love with the passion of newlyweds and the tenderness of long partners who knew every inch of each other's bodies and souls. The new century arrived with celebration and anticipation. The ranch was more successful than ever. The children were thriving in their various pursuits, and Xander and Willa were still deeply in love after more than 20 years together. In 1901, Sam married a young woman named Alice whom he had met at a horse auction in Albuquerque. She was smart and capable, with a love of horses that matched his own. The wedding was a joyous occasion, and within a year, Willa and Xander became grandparents when Alice gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Holding her grandson for the first time, Willa felt the circle of life complete itself in a way that was both humbling and exhilarating. This tiny person was the future, the continuation of everything she and Xander had built, the next chapter in a story that had begun with a broken bucket and a kind stranger. "What do you think?" Sam asked nervously, watching his mother cradle his son. "I think he is perfect," Willa said, tears streaming down her face. "I think you and Alice have been blessed with a miracle, and I am so grateful I get to be his grandmother." Xander stood behind his wife, one hand on her shoulder, looking down at his first grandchild with wonder. "Well done, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Well done." The years continued their inexorable march forward. Grace graduated from her teaching program and took a position at a school in Silver City, returning home regularly to visit. Emma married a neighboring rancher's son and helped run their combined operations with skill and innovation. Henry, after experimenting with various pursuits, discovered a talent for veterinary medicine and went to study at an agricultural college, returning to become the unofficial veterinarian for the entire county. Thomas and Margaret's children grew and married and started their own families. The ranch complex continued to expand, multiple households now operating in concert, bound by blood and affection and common purpose. Through it all, Xander and Willa remained the heart of it all, the foundation upon which everything else was built. They were elders now, in their 50s and then their 60s, but they remained active and engaged, still working the ranch alongside their children and grandchildren, still making decisions and offering guidance. Their love had not diminished with age. If anything, it had deepened and strengthened, tempered by years of facing life together, enriched by shared experiences and accumulated memories. They knew each other's thoughts before they were spoken, could communicate entire conversations with a glance, moved together with the synchronicity of two people who had become one without losing their individual selves. On their 30th anniversary in 1908, they took a trip, just the two of them, back to Montana where Xander had been born. It was the first time Willa had ever left New Mexico, and the journey was an adventure that made them both feel young again. Standing on the land where Xander's father's ranch had been, now owned by strangers, Xander felt the past and present merge in a bittersweet rush. This was where his life had begun, where he had learned to work and dream and hope. But it was not home anymore. Home was New Mexico, was the ranch he had built with Willa, was the family they had created together. "Thank you for bringing me here," Willa said, standing beside him and looking out over the Montana landscape. "Thank you for coming with me," Xander said. "It is good to see it again, but it just confirms what I already knew. My home is wherever you are." "That is the most romantic thing you have ever said to me," Willa said. "And you have said many romantic things over the years." Xander smiled and pulled her close. "I have had a lot of time to practice." They returned to New Mexico feeling refreshed and renewed, ready to face whatever years remained to them with gratitude and grace. Those years were good ones. There were losses, of course. Friends passed away. Beloved animals died. Drought and hard winters challenged them. But there were so many more joys. More grandchildren, eventually great-grandchildren, the ranch continuing to thrive, their children and grandchildren happy and successful in their various endeavors. In 1920, Xander and Willa celebrated their 42nd anniversary. They were both in their 70s now, slowed by age but not diminished by it. They still took their morning coffee on the porch, still rode out to check on the ranch, still stole kisses when no one was watching. The world had changed dramatically since they had first met. The frontier had closed. New Mexico had achieved statehood. Automobiles were replacing horses on the roads. Electricity was coming to even rural areas. But the essentials remained the same. Land still needed tending, cattle still needed raising, families still needed loving. "Do you ever think about that morning?" Willa asked one evening, the question an echo of conversations they had had many times over the years. "When the bucket broke?" "Every day," Xander said, as he always did. "Every single day I think about how lucky I was to stop here, to meet you, to be given the chance at this life." I think about how close I came to sending you away, Willa admitted. I almost said no when you offered to fix the bucket, almost sent you on your way. And then where would we be? Somewhere else, Xander said. Living different lives, probably lonelier lives. But we did not send each other away. We chose each other, and that choice has made all the difference. It has, Willa agreed. She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close as the sun set over the land they loved. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the evening shadows lengthen, and Willa thought about the fullness of a life well lived. She thought about the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the ranch that had grown from a struggling operation to a thriving multi-generational enterprise, the love that had sustained and strengthened her through every challenge. No regrets, Xander asked softly. Not a single one, Willa said. You? Not one, Xander confirmed. This life, this family, this love, it is more than I ever dreamed possible. You gave me that, Willa. You gave me everything. We gave it to each other, Willa corrected. That is how partnership works. We built this together, every step of the way. Together, Xander echoed, the word carrying the weight of 42 years of shared life. Always together. Always, Willa agreed. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss in the rain and their wedding and the birth of their children and every significant moment of their lives together, Xander and Willa Walsh sat wrapped in each other's arms, grateful beyond measure for the chance encounter that had changed everything. A broken bucket, a frayed rope, a stranger with kind eyes and skilled hands who had stopped to help when he did not have to. These simple things had been the seeds from which an entire life had grown, a life of love and family and purpose. Rope was frayed, Xander murmured, repeating the words he had spoken that long ago morning. Replaced it now, Willa finished, smiling at the memory. They sat together in the gathering darkness, two people who had become one while remaining themselves, bound by love that had only grown stronger with time, grateful for every moment they had been given, every trial they had overcome, every joy they had shared. Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of family. Sam and Alice were visiting with their grown children, and the house was full of laughter and conversation. Soon someone would call them in for supper, and they would gather around the table as they had done thousands of times before, sharing food and stories and love. But for now, this moment was theirs alone. Just Willa and Xander, sitting on the porch of the home they had built, looking out over the land they had tended, wrapped in the love that had sustained them through 42 years of marriage and would sustain them until their last breath. I love you, Willa said, the words as necessary as breathing. I love you too, Xander replied, the words as true as the stars overhead. And in that moment, with the evening star rising and the smell of sage on the breeze and the sound of family voices carrying from inside, everything was exactly as it should be. Perfect in its imperfection, complete in its ongoing evolution. A story that had begun with a simple act of kindness and had blossomed into a legacy that would endure for generations. This was what it meant to build a life together. This was what it meant to choose love, day after day, year after year, through all the seasons of a shared existence. This was the reward for that choice, and it was greater than any treasure, more valuable than any worldly success. Xander and Willa Walsh had found what so many people searched for and never found. They had found home in each other, and in that home, they had built heaven on earth. The story that had begun with a broken bucket and a frayed rope had become an epic of love and partnership, a testament to what two people could accomplish when they worked together with open hearts and willing hands. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth celebrating. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the night deepened around them, Xander and Willa sat together in perfect contentment, knowing that they had been blessed beyond measure, knowing that their love would endure beyond their mortal lives in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their legacy forward. This was not the end of their story. The end would come eventually, as it comes for everyone, but even then it would not truly be an ending. It would be a transformation, a passing of the torch to the next generation, a continuation of the love and values they had spent their lives building and sharing. But that was for later. For now, there was this moment, this perfect evening, this overwhelming sense of gratitude and completion. There was the touch of a beloved hand, the sound of a familiar voice, the shared history of 4 decades of choosing each other every single day. "Come inside," Willa said eventually, standing and pulling Xander up with her. "Our family is waiting." "Lead the way," Xander said, as he had said so many times before, and hand in hand they walked toward the warm light spilling from the house, toward the sound of voices and laughter, toward the life they had built together from love and hope and a broken bucket that had brought a stranger to their door on a dusty morning long ago. And there, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, sharing a meal at a table that had been the center of their family life for decades, Xander and Willa Walsh knew that every choice they had made, every challenge they had faced, every moment they had shared had been worth it. Their love story, born from a simple act of service and nurtured through years of partnership and devotion, was complete. Not ended, but complete. Fulfilled in every way that mattered. A testament to the power of love, the value of commitment, and the beauty of 2 lives joined together in common purpose and mutual devotion. This was their legacy. This was their triumph. This was the life they had built, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one loving moment at a time. And it was everything,